Welcome to the Early Years Together. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Young.
And I'm Deborah Brown. Every week in this first series, we've discussed how to support development of children's communication and language, from spontaneous chats over mealtimes, during care routines, and day-to-day interactions, to how theory and research underpins these practices. So, Jacqueline, what's on the agenda for the final episode of our series?
Well, Deborah, today's episode is a bit of a celebration. As it's the last episode of Series 1, we wanted to round things off by focusing firmly on the listeners. So today we're answering a selection of listener questions. As always, we'll be offering practical, realistic ideas to help listeners tune into a child's thinking, to help nurture their natural curiosity and to build communication habits.
So shall we get answering those questions and continue building on everything we've explored together this series?
Our first question is from Amy, who's a student here at the University of Sussex on the MA in Early Years Education with EYTS. And she's asked, how can we have meaningful conversation around a child's artwork that shows interest and encouragement whilst also supporting intrinsic motivation rather than performative praise? Could you suggest some quality phrases that could replace responses like, wow, beautiful painting, I love it, with something that is more child-focused and open-ended, please?
Okay, so I think to begin with, Amy's idea in her question around the response, wow, beautiful painting, I love it, is something that actually happens quite a lot. So I think we need to remember that that is often happening because it naturally comes about. We often want to praise a child in that way. But the way we need to move forward is to shift that focus. So that focus from judgment to getting the child to thinking about their choices, about their feelings, and really about the process that's happened in front of them.
Yes, Deborah. So I think it's moving from that evaluating their work to really describing what they might notice, to wondering, or in fact to inviting children to reflect.
Yeah, and I think what we could do there is kind of, let's think now, shall we, of some alternatives, perhaps that we could come up with instead of that, wow, beautiful painting, noticing details. If a child's presented something, you can comment on something, such as, I can see you've used a lot of small dots here. Tell me about this part.
Inviting, I think, children to engage in some kind of storytelling around their work. So asking them, what is your painting about? Could be a good starting point as well.
Another way we can ask children about their creative work is through curiosity, and especially thinking about the process as well. That idea of, why did you decide to use something? Maybe like the small brush there would be a good way to ask a child.
Yeah, and if we are going to ask them questions, thinking about things that focus their attention on effort and persistence. So asking questions like, was there anything tricky? How did you work out how to represent this bit? That might be a good way to move forward.
But also recognising that it's the child's work, so them taking ownership of what they've achieved. So which part are you most pleased with? Or why do you think that is a different question you could ask too.
Maybe perhaps pushing things a little bit further. If you think the child is a little bit older and has the capacity to think about other people's opinions, which not all children do, depending on the age of the child and the development of the child, you might ask something like, if someone looked at this, what would you want them to feel?
That's a good one, but obviously quite hard and will really push a child's thinking. Some open reflection. So rather than focusing on something specific, more generic question on whether is there something you want to tell me about in this picture?
That one's really open-ended, isn't it? So regardless of the age of the child, they're going to find that one much easier to respond to. And then thinking perhaps about questions that relate to the materials that were used or the exploration process. So things like, how did you get this colour? What colours did you mix together for this picture? Might be useful.
And then another way would be to maybe tune into a child's emotions and having that question focused on, what do you feel most proud about? That can open up some discussion about their work.
And really remembering that when children show you their artwork, they're not really inviting judgment. What they want from it is to share a moment of connection. So using whatever questions you see fit to deepen that connection.
Our next question is from Becky, who is also a student on the MA in Early Years with EYTS at Sussex. Becky's asked, when talking with a child, is it more useful to look at them, look with them, or both?
Now, that's an interesting question, isn't it? And I suppose the short answer to that is both, but for different reasons and at different moments. I think it all depends on the context and your knowledge of the individual child and their individual needs. So looking at the child invites connection with that child. So this matters if you want to tune into their emotional state, show that you're present and available, to signal that you're listening, or to support children who rely mainly on facial cues for safety. Looking at a child really says, I'm here with you, and it allows you to model that active listening.
We discussed that in episode 6 of this podcast series. So if we go on to looking with the child, that's more about shared attention and joint meaning making. And you would consider doing this if you want to enter into the child's world of focus, share attention on an object or an idea or an action, reduce the sense of the child being evaluated, that idea that you're there with the child, to support them and support their motivation by focusing on the process. That goes back to that question we had earlier. And encouraging language, problem solving and narrative as well. It's really powerful in creative, investigative or imaginative play, or even in those moments of sustained shared thinking. And we've mentioned SST in several episodes, but in episode 2 we covered the basics of SST.
And that combination really matters, doesn't it, Deborah? When we're with children, we need to move between those different modes of connecting with the child, collaborating with the child when we might be sharing our attention and both looking at something, and then perhaps allowing the child some autonomy in that. So leading what mode we're in by reading the signals that the child's giving. And that's where the real skill is. It's in reading that moment and choosing the version that supports the child's thinking, confidence and emotional safety the best.
So in any one interaction, you may start with that attunement, making brief eye contact to show presence, but then making sure you follow the child's lead. That can then shift into shared attention. You'll be looking at what a child's looking at, and at that point you may want to narrate what you can see with the child. So you're looking together and then talking about what you can see. You're following the child's cues. If they keep checking your face, they may be signalling that they need connection. So you might need to return to looking at the child again. But if they then stay focused on the object, it's a good idea to join them there. Always in any interaction, return to the child after exploring something together, glance back, look at them, and that encourages their thoughts or interpretation, and that will then hopefully stimulate more moments of talk.
So our next question is from Eunice, another one of our students at the University of Sussex, and she's asked, what are some creative ways families who speak multiple languages at home can use their diverse linguistic backgrounds to enhance their child's language and communication skills during daily routine?
I think in this case, to answer Eunice's question, we need to remember that multilingualism is a creative resource that can be woven into everyday life. Children thrive when languages are used naturally, playfully, and also with a purpose. So I think building it into day-to-day routines is really key, isn't it, Jacqueline?
Yeah, and we can start really with greetings. So using different languages for good morning, or choosing clothes, or what's for breakfast. So those very early interactions first thing in the morning.
I think as well, making sure that we use language and switch it about a bit. So encouraging family focus. Let's say everything about our breakfast in grandma's language today. So it becomes part of what we do.
And again, that sort of switching forwards and backwards we can do with naming and noticing anything, can't we, Deborah? So, inviting a child to name body parts, clothing, or objects around the home in whichever language they choose. And perhaps as the objects are really in front of them, so that it's a concrete connection to the things that they're looking at.
I think when you're talking about a concrete connection, meal times are a social time where we can actually really build on that. So using food and encouraging storytelling around memories or traditions linked to foods in various different languages.
Cooking, I think, Deborah, as well.
Yeah,
isn't
that's
it?
a good idea.
It's something we often do with children. It's a really common activity that people do with their children. So if you're cooking with a child, switching languages as you cook, or repeating instructions or explore ingredients in both languages.
Encouraging choice as well. Actually, if you are cooking, you could hold milk and say milk, latte, if you're using another language, and then let the child respond with either word.
And again, in play, having role play with languages. So you could have a character or a toy that speaks in a particular language, and maybe even a toy that translates for the other toy, really making it playful.
And stories are a great way to encourage talk generally, but even in this case, starting a story in one language, let the child carry on in another.
And then moving on from playtime really to those other moments that we've talked about a lot during this series that are really precious time. So maybe bath time and bedtime. Again, you can repeat some of those naming routines, naming actions like wash, pour or splash at bath time in different languages.
And encouraging talking about feelings in bedtime, those really intimate moments where, you can bring along gentle emotional vocabulary, and that can come about in any language. The bedtime story, again, is a great way to draw together and encourage talk. So multilingual and dual language books invite familiarity. They also give an opportunity to revisit lots of both languages or lots of different languages. And the National Literacy Trust has some resources and a book list. We've included those in the notes for today's episode.
So it's time now to come to our final question of this episode. Deborah, I can't believe we're nearly at the end. And this question is from Sarah, a nursery practitioner from Canterbury. And she said, in episode 8, you talked about screen time. The government have now provided guidelines on screen time for under 5s. Does this change your advice at all?
Well, I think, shall we talk about what the new guidance is to begin with? So in the recent guidance, it suggests that under 2s need to avoid screen time except for shared interactive activities. For ages 2 to 5, try to keep screen time to no more than 1 hour a day. And the guidance also suggests to avoid screens at meal times and in the hour before bed.
This is quite a shift, isn't it, Deborah? So it's kind of shifting from that use your judgment and do what you think's best to some really clear practical limits.
Responding to episode 8, where we talked about how to make screen time an opportunity for interaction, what we said at that point is still really very relevant.
Yeah, I think the kind of co-viewing we discussed in episode 8 actually is now a central recommendation, so it's still really, really useful. Do review the episode to hear how to do this.
Shall we have a think about what's new around screen time? Some guidance on what kind of content is there as well. So slow-paced, predictable content is much better for young brains.
I think as well they talk about fast-paced social media style videos and trying to avoid those for using those or viewing them with under 5s.
And things like AI toys, chatbots and smart speakers should not be used with young children until more evidence is available.
So this really gives parents much firmer boundaries to work with. The new guidance also gives some practical screen swap ideas. For instance, it talks about swapping a bedtime programme for a story and swapping a mealtime video for a simple game or conversation.
And that now really does bring us to the end of today's question and answer episode and to the end of our very first series of the early years together. Thank you so very much for spending this time with us, for listening, and also for sending us your questions and feedback.
It's been so much fun, hasn't it, Deborah, exploring how to support communication and language with all of you, whether you're a parent, a carer or a practitioner. We hope these episodes have given you ideas, reassurance and a sense of companionship as you navigate everyday interactions with children.
And although this is the end now of series 1, it's definitely not goodbye, as we're already planning for series 2, and that's already underway.
So do keep an eye on your podcast feed from Sunday the 27th of September in 2026 for our new series, which will air from that date in September to early December. If you've enjoyed this series, we'd love if you could leave a rating or share the podcast with anyone you feel might find it helpful.
So this really is, until next time, it's the end. Thank you for listening, for connecting and for being part of the Early Years Together community. We hope to see you again in September. Goodbye.